Hello and welcome to Mr. C History. Now behind me is the majestic Rochester Castle in Rochester in Kent, and today I'm going to talk about the very interesting siege, one of the longest sieges in history, one of the most significant and brutal, the siege of Rochester Castle. Now, where are we in time? We are at 1215, and this really is a continuation of my video on the Magna Carta. That was signed in the June of 1215 by King John and the barons. But by the October of 1215, King John suddenly realized that some of the Magna Carta was taking his power away, and he didn't like it, and so he decides to renege, go back on the promises of the Magna Carta. And so he declares war on the barons, and there are skirmishes all over, and by the October of 1215 it really culminates here in Rochester. Now, why Rochester and Rochester Castle? Well, Rochester Castle was built in the 1080s by some bishop of Rochester, and then it was heavily fortified by King Henry I. But by the 13th century, it was a big, significant castle with lots and lots of defences, a huge bailey wall all around it, very strong stone keep, and it's in a key important position. So both the barons and King John want to have a hold on it, so which is why they meet here. Now, the barons were led by a man called William de Boigny. He was the one who in charge of this garrison, and as King John is approaching, he retreats to this castle keep, ready to defend. Well, here at the top of Rochester Castle, it's very easy to see the significance of it. Just over there, now the A2 bridge, that is Watling Street, the key road that the Romans built, of course, from the Kent coast, from the Channel, essentially from the boats from the continent, straight to London. And the barons were hoping to get their French support, London going that way. You can also see the River Medway all along here where the boats would have been docked, and the castle there. So whoever controls Rochester Castle, on its hill here, looking over those two things, controls the route to the continent and the route to London. Just look at those walls, the thickness and the highness of level. How would any invading army be able to scale those? Well, John is able to scale those walls with his professional army and comes up through here. He breaks through the outer walls and through the bailey, and he gets to here, the sort of castle gardens as it is now, but the inner part of the bailey of the keep there. And he sets up his trebuchets and his catapults, and he's throwing things at the thick keep walls, from rocks to big logs to pestilence to all sorts of things, with the aim of destroying and getting hold of that keep. But the barons, they stay firm, they hold off, and through those sort of slatted windows they fire back, especially some of the arrowmen. Many of the baron arrowmen were pretty good and skilled, and they were able to snipe some of King John's men. So it's very frustrating for King John. It would be here in the bows, this happens to be the cesspit, where they would have hunkered down with what food they could find, which was very scant, and with the shell, with rocks and barrages being hit at them all the time, trebuchets being flown. They got to hold out. Now, the barons managed to withstand this barrage for a long time, about a month, and King John was growing more and more frustrated. And in a moment which some people thought was madness, he ordered for 45 of the best Kentish pigs to be delivered. Why? Well, he ordered them to come here to the southeast tower, which is just one here, the round one there, round being significant. And on this ground here, he ordered his men to start digging a tunnel underneath that round tower. Now, at the time, that tower was not round, it was rectangular or square, like the one over there, and they managed to dig all around the corners and built a sort of hole underneath it. Why? To wait to undermine it. What they did is they dug the hole, and then they built these sort of wooden supports so they could dig and it not collapse on them. So they were digging it, wooden sort of scaffolding, and then he sent in the pigs, dead of course, sent in 45 of these pigs. And then what he did was he set fire to them. Why? Well, at the time, before gunpowder, one of the most combustible things on earth was pig fat. If you throw in the 45 pigs, set them alight, that pig fat will burn, it will burn down the wood supports, and the whole tower will collapse. And that is indeed what happened. So those poor barons who held up in there, not only are they after a month of starvation having to withstand the smell of pork, of burning bacon, now suddenly one of their key defences, the keep, has been undermined and destroyed. This is the top of that tower, that was the southeast tower, and you can see now it's been rebuilt in a circular way because with those sharp corners, easy to undermine. They learnt their lessons. But there we go. The stone keep is breached. The tower collapses. King John's men come running in. What's next for the barons? Amazingly, they held out for another week, somewhere deep in the keep here, probably locking everything around stones. But with that tower, that one behind me there, gone, they managed to hold on for another week. Extraordinary. But it was too much. After 7 weeks in the siege, it was breached. King John had won, the barons had lost. There's some rather interesting evidence of the siege here. Over there is the southeast tower, the one that was undermined. And you can see there's this sort of half arch. That half arch would have been a full arch at the time of the siege. They've rebuilt it to be stronger because that whole bit would have totally collapsed. Evidence of the siege. So a victory for King John there. He managed to take control of the castle, take control of the road to London. Now he's not a very good victor. He's very brutal and cruel, executes a lot of those arrow men, the very good skilled archers from those windows who were sniping his men, and he's brutal about the barons, etc. And this seems to motivate the barons even more, and crucially they're able to convince Prince Louis of France to invade England. Maybe if King John had been a better winner, that might not have happened. But does he win the war overall? Definitely not. So by November 1215, he's taken Rochester Castle. But 1216 is a bad year for King John because in the sort of, at some point during the summer of 1216, he's going across the Wash, which is an area, East Anglia, Norfolk, between Lincolnshire. He's marauding through mud and through a swamp, and he loses all his treasure, all his crown jewels, his money, essentially. This spirals out of control a bit, and he starts to lose a lot of the battles from the war. It gets worse. The November of 1216, he eats too many lampreys, I think, too many eels in Newark near Nottinghamshire, and he dies. He dies of dysentery, having eaten too much. Extraordinary. He's succeeded by his 9-year-old son, Henry, and actually the council, the ruling council, his 9-year-old doesn't make any decisions. The ruling council decides to negotiate with the barons and ends the war, and agrees to follow the terms of the Magna Carta again. So in death, King John loses. The barons ultimately win. Yes, King John gets control of Rochester Castle, but that victory is short-lived. So there you go, a lesson in being a good victor there. And I think, again, it's a lesson about King John, one of the worst kings England has ever had. And this really is part of the thing. I must go up to the Wash and see if I can find his treasure. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I am, going up that castle. Do come along and visit. And as always, please make sure you subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.